My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And the subject for today is, what are millennials and Gen Z complaining about? Now, why would I want to do a show on this? And it's because as a licensed marriage and family therapist, I can't get through a week without having a parent or two parents come to me. And they're very sad. They feel very guilty. There's a level of shame that they have. They feel like they're not doing well by their children because they're having a difficult time in life. And they're buying into this thought that their kids are telling them. And by kids, I mean people who are, let's say, 18, 19, 20, up to 29, 30 years old. And we hear the same complaints that back then, let's say for boomers or my generation, which would be Generation X, that it was very easy to find a job. They were plentiful. It was very easy to find somewhere to live. It was very easy to get a mortgage. It was very easy to find a partner, to get married, to settle down, to have kids. And somehow it was just much easier back then. Well, I want to talk to that. Here's the other part I want to talk to. I find it really, really interesting, is that 30-year-olds now are being referred to as kids. And I was thinking about this, of how times have changed. Think about how many musicians have died before that they were 30 years old. Think about some of the ones who haven't died before they were 30. Take a look at somebody like George Harrison or John Lennon from the Beatles. Now, they were 29 years old when the Beatles broke up. So when we look at this, all of the music, all of the things that they created as a band, they accomplished that before they were 30 years old. And now we're referring to 29 and 30-year-olds as children. Now, times have changed, but have they? So I want to take a look at this because maybe it's just our attitudes have changed. Maybe nothing really has changed all that much. So one of the first things I think we need to look at is we want to compare minimum wage compared to rent. Now, I'm going to use some facts here, obviously, but I want to also use anecdotal evidence because, well, number one, I think if you want to spend enough time, you can Google information, right? You can do that. You can go through Wikipedia. You can find this stuff. But I also think it's important because I lived through that time also. And so I can put my own personal take on this as well. So let's take this back to 1989 in New York. The minimum wage back in New York at that time was $3.35 an hour. If you could believe that. Now, I needed a place to live. So I rented a room. Now, when I say a room, I mean a room. I couldn't afford a one-bedroom apartment. So I had a room. I didn't have a washer and dryer, so I had to spend money to go to a laundromat. I didn't have a refrigerator. I mean, it was a room. That was it. And it cost $650 for this room. Now, let's say you make $3.35 an hour. So with a little bit of math here, you take $650, divide it by $3.35, and it comes out to be 194 hours that you would need to work in a month in order to pay for that. Now, you can do the math on that. It's about 50 hours a week of work. That's a lot of work. Now, to try to close as we can compare apples to apples, let's take a look at the minimum wage here in Nevada, where I live now, in the year 2024. The minimum wage is $10.25, but in about another week or two in July, it's going to be $12 an hour. But let's move it to $10.25 just for today's discussion. The average one-bedroom apartment, not a room, a one-bedroom apartment, and be sure, because you can find a lot of apartments that are just fine for under $1,400. But let's just take that number at $1,400. A little bit of math here. $10.25 into $1,400 gives us 136 hours of work that you need in a month to pay for that. Now that's a lot of work too. But again, simple math. 194 hours in 1989 compared to 136 hours of work in the year 2024. So if Gen Z or millennials are complaining that it's harder to find a place to live today than it was, say, 30 years ago, are they correct? Generally speaking, no. I mean, obviously you could find differences, and I know people like to argue today and they like to find little pieces of information to make people wrong. I get that. But overall, the answer is no. It was harder in the late 80s to find a place to live. Let's continue about mortgage rates. That seems to be a big problem these days. People are complaining, oh, they can't get a house. Mortgage rates are so incredibly high. They are high compared to what they were like 4 years ago. But let's compare it to 1980. The mortgage rates in 1980 were 18.4%. 18.4%, that's incredibly high. And as the 80s went on, all the way up to 1990, they had gone down. But in 1990, the mortgage rate was 9.78. So remember that number, 9.78. In the year 2020, it was only 3%. That's nothing. And now in the year 2024, where everybody's complaining that mortgage rates are so high, they're about 7%. 7% is pretty high, but it's not close to 9.78. So once again, Gen Z, millennials, do you have any facts to stand on there? No. If you were trying to buy a house through the 80s and through the 90s, it was difficult. Now, I bought my first house in 1994. The mortgage rates then were higher than what it is now. So again, you would be wrong. Let's look at the unemployment rate. Because again, what a lot of people are saying now, and again, they push this on social media, and the way social media really gets pushed is because people like to hear something. And if they like to hear it, and it just kind of works for them, then they push it more, and they tell other people, and nobody does any fact checking, and then they just kind of go with it. But here's the thing. The unemployment rate in 1990 was 10.3%. Again, incredibly high in 1990. Now, I graduated college in 1989 with a 10.3 unemployment rate. That, again, very, very difficult then to get a job. And it didn't just end there. It went all the way through up until like when Bill Clinton was in office. I think he took office January, whatever it was, 22nd of 1993. So you're talking a bunch of years there where the unemployment rate was very high. Let's look at the current unemployment rate. Right now, it's at about 4%, which is historically low. I guess you could say it's historically low in one sense, but on the other way, you can't. Why? Because it's been at about the high 3s to low 4s for many years. We've got almost 4 years of Biden. We had 4 years of Trump. We had 8 years of Obama in office. Now, the first year was a disaster because he was taken over during another disaster, right? We were going through a recession slash depression. But the last 7 years of Obama in office, the unemployment rate was about 4%. So we're looking at about, what now? What is it? Over a decade and a half of low unemployment. So what are we complaining about, saying that it was much easier to get a job back in the 80s and 90s? It was not. So once again, if you're going to go along with this, especially if you're my age and you're a parent, you're feeling bad, don't feel bad, don't feel guilty, don't feel shameful, because these numbers actually back you up. There is something that's changing here, but we'll get to that in a second. Let's take a look at gas prices, because that's something else that everybody likes to complain about all the time. And here, they do have a bit of an argument, because gas prices are higher. They're about 4 times as high as they were in the 80s and 90s. That's true. But you know what else is true? That fuel efficiency has increased. Because I can go back, and I remember the car I had in 1989, and it got about 8 miles to the gallon. I got a car outside that gets closer to 40 miles to the gallon. So if you do the math on that and you really look at it, it kind of levels itself out. Now somebody could say, well, it doesn't level out all the time. That's true. But then I would say you need to make a decision. Do you need to drive a huge truck to look cool. Do you? Probably not. You can buy a very fuel efficient car that will level out the playing field for you to make a difference in your life. You don't have to get the biggest, fastest car out on the road. So that's in your control to change that. Now, I want to look at this. It's called the Monitoring the Future Survey. This survey has been going on for the last 48 years, and what it takes a look at is the work attitudes of 18-year-olds. Very interesting stuff because, again, I think it's the attitudes of people that are changing more than anything else. So number one, only 36% of 18-year-olds today said that they were willing to work overtime. Hold it, what? Only 36% of people that supposedly have no money, that are having a rough go in the world, that want to live at home, that are saying the world's so tough they don't want to work overtime? I can tell you, I'm 59 years old. I get up at 4:15 every day, and my work isn't done until 7 o'clock almost every day. I do that 5 days a week. Then I work less on Saturday, but that's only 12 hours. And then I take off on Sundays. And I'm 59. You're telling me at 18 years old, with all the health and energy in the world, you don't want to put in overtime? You don't want to have money for the future? You don't want to have a house? Like, that makes no sense. It's an attitude problem. Let's look at something else. Only 70% of 18-year-olds today said that they would work if they somehow made enough money where they could live comfortably. So let's say your boomer parents that you're complaining about, or your Gen X parents that you're complaining about, they die or whatever, and they gift you the home, or they got some money lying around from all the hard work they've done the last bunch of years. And so now you don't have to work very hard or work at all. And so they said only 70% said they would actually work. What about that other 30%? Because work is not just about money. It's about the value you give to society. It's meaning and purpose. I mean, if you want to take somebody that has mental illness or difficulty in their life, putting things together, they're anxious, they're depressed, they just don't know where they're going in life. You give them meaning and purpose with a job, and almost all those problems go away. Now, not for everybody all the time, but it's definitely a criteria that needs to be met. In other words, do something every day that's important, not just to yourself, but to other people. Make yourself valuable. And a lot of these 18-year-olds would not want to do that. I know plenty of people that have a lot of money. I know plenty of millionaires. They could have quit working years and years and years ago, but they love working. It keeps their mind fresh. They are interacting socially with people. They're still making a difference in the world. It's very disheartening, almost heartbreaking to think that there's 18-year-olds, young people that have the whole world ahead of them, that they can do all these amazing things. Everything is in their favor. They're physically healthy, they're mentally healthy, they've got strength, they have all the energy in the world that they would need for anything, and yet they wouldn't work if they got a bunch of money. That makes no sense. Again, it's a work ethic problem. Let's continue. 44% said that not wanting to work hard could be a problem in their life. Hold it, what? 44% said that not wanting to work hard could be a problem? I think that number should be about 100%. Like 100% of people with a decent work ethic would say that you live in a capitalistic society. If you're not going to work hard, somebody else will. And they're going to take what you want or take what you need from you. I mean, have you not learned that you are there to earn your way in life? So if you're not going to work hard and you think that it could be a problem instead of saying it is a problem, how are you going to get by in life? What makes you think that you'll be attractive to anybody? What makes you think that you're going to be able to raise a family? It's unbelievable. So let's get to my last part of my show here. I want to talk about inflation for a second. So what is inflation, or why is it? Now, I don't want to get into the super details of it, but this is just a very simplified version, but it's very true. Why are things inflated? It's because there's too much money chasing too few goods. That's the way it works. I'll give you an example. I live in Las Vegas. Every show here is sold out almost all the time. What does that mean? It means that if you come here to Las Vegas and you want to go to a show, you are going to pay a lot of money. That's because there's thousands of people with stacks of cash, and they're all paying for tickets, and they always sell out. So what's going to happen is this corporate is going to keep raising those prices until they start getting a few empty seats in these halls. That's what's going to happen. That's why you can go to a very minor type of show and it's still going to cost you $100 to $300. You want to go to a Raiders game? Very difficult. It's still going to cost you about $300 just to get in the stadium. And the Raiders aren't even a good team. This is because, again, too much money chasing too few goods. So when we talk about that the economy sucks or it's bad, well, it is for some people, but the thing is, there's too many people making too much money, and that's what raises the prices on things. It's just straight capitalism. If you can charge more and still get it, you will. Now, of course, inflation is also driven by corporate greed. That's true, but that's for another subject. But there is a connection here between millennials and, again, 18 to 29 years old, let's say, that are living at home. That's actually creating the inflation. So let's take a look here at what Morgan Stanley says. As inflation and the rising cost of living pushes young adults to move back in with their parents, many are turning to Gucci, Chanel, and Louis Vuitton to lift their spirits. The record number of young adults living at home with their parents is driving the growth for luxury goods in the US and the West, Morgan Stanley analysts say in their latest reports. US Census data shows that nearly half of all young adults from 18 to 29 still live at home, which is the highest level recorded since the end of the Great Depression in 1940. So let's analyze this just for a second. We're talking about the luxury boom here. What is the luxury boom? The luxury boom are these 18 to 29-year-olds who are not launching out into the real world. They're staying at home. And what are they doing at home? They're buying Gucci, they're buying Chanel, they're buying Louis Vuitton. Lack of work ethic. Why? Because if you're living at home when you're 25, 26, 29, 35 years old, all that extra money you should be saving so you can get your own place. Stop complaining about your parents that they had it easy. This luxury boom, again, being pushed by these younger generations, well, you could say too, it's the parents' fault for allowing them to live at home. They should be throwing them out. That's number one. But number two, instead of saving money, they're spending it. And what happens if you are, I don't even know, whatever Gucci sells. If there's a bunch of young people spending all their extra money on your product, wouldn't you raise your prices until they stop buying it? Yes, that's the answer. So until we start pushing out these 18 to 29-year-olds and telling them to start living a life of their own, the prices are going to continue to get higher. That's what's going to happen. So you can complain about inflation, but the millennials and Gen Z are the ones that are causing, not all of it, but much of it. Hopefully this has been interesting to you. My name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.